Buenas tardes, desde Buenos Aires 14:32, Madrid 18:32. Estamos muy contentas al celebrar pues esta segunda sesión de Musas de Vanguardia, dedicado en esta primera edición a las mujeres migrantes. Ya hace algún tiempo estuvimos reunidos para hablar sobre Lina Bobardi y en esta ocasión pues tenemos el enorme placer de poder compartir esta tarde para hablar sobre Grete Schuette-Lihotzky. En principio, pues lo que vamos a hacer es recuperar, para aquellos que no conozcan el proyecto de Musas de Vanguardia, vamos a presentaros brevemente el proyecto y a continuación pues os presentaremos a una invitada muy especial que nos va a hablar sobre Grete Schuette-Lihotzky, Arquitectura y Política. El proyecto de Musas de Vanguardia es un proyecto que se desarrolla a través de Instagram, donde Luciana Levington y Mara Sánchez Llorens, arquitectas, y Luciana es pintora, pues lo que hacemos es divulgar, dar a conocer el trabajo de un conjunto de mujeres, de arquitectas y de artistas, que desde distintos enfoques vamos a ir creando una serie de ediciones para presentarlas a través de una estrategia que, como os decía, está muy ligada a Instagram, pero también cuenta pues con eventos como el que hoy nos reúne, el que nos reúne hoy aquí. El proyecto cuenta con el apoyo de la Embajada de Austria en Buenos Aires, con la Agencia Española de Cooperación Internacional, que es la que ahora mismo nos está cediendo el espacio, y con otra serie de embajadas y museos, como el Museo de Arte Decorativo. Tenemos una serie de ediciones que, como veis, trataremos de hablar de las mujeres migrantes, activistas, pedagogas, surrealistas, geómetras, etcétera. Y el material que tiene es una serie de líneas de tiempo donde vamos relacionando a estas mujeres con sus obras. En esta primera edición tenemos, como os comentaba, a Lina Bobardi, que fue la primera musa, Grete Schuette-Lihotzky, que es la que nos ocupa en este momento y de la que estamos divulgando todavía material, Nora Borges, a continuación, una pintora maravillosa que presentaremos también en breve, Lidi Prati, una artista, pintora, geómetra, ¿no?, del mundo más abstracto, y que también será una de las protagonistas, Maruja Mayo, la española más ligada quizá al mundo del surrealismo, única, y Charlotte Perriand. Con estas 6 mujeres conformamos esta primera edición de Musas Mujeres de Vanguardia, mujeres migrantes, y pues cada una de esas ediciones, aparte de estas imágenes que os hemos comentado, Luciana, si quieres seguir tú.
Sí, cómo no. Buenas tardes. Bueno, en esta presentación les queremos mostrar, este proyecto está alojado, como les decía Mara, en Instagram, y lo que se ve acá, lo que se veía recién era como el feed del Instagram. Después, hay entregables que son dibujos que se pueden descargar en casa para niños o para grandes. Y también hay mapas donde se va mostrando el recorrido, los lugares donde dejaron su huella, en este caso Grete Schuette-Lihotzky. Acá pueden ver estos descargables, que son gratuitos, son unos PDF que se pueden bajar en casa. Tienen dibujos que están hechos por Mara y por mí, entonces se pueden imprimir en hoja 4 y así uno va descubriendo a medida que también los puede intervenir. También es muy interesante, hay audios que pueden también escuchar online o descargar, y están en 3 idiomas, en inglés, en español y en austríaco, gracias a todo el apoyo de la Embajada de Austria. Colaboró con nosotras para llegar a más destinos. Todo eso se puede ver en una parte que se llama link en bio, o sea, en la bio de Instagram hay un botón que uno aprieta un link y ahí está todo el material que se puede escuchar online o descargar. Bueno, este es como, lo voy a hacer breve para que tengamos tiempo de escuchar a Bernadette. Pero ahora les voy a presentar a Lisa Butzenlechner de la Embajada de Austria, que les va a decir unas palabras. Y bueno, antes de pasarle la voz, queríamos agradecerle especialmente al embajador Merán, a Lisa y a Sofía por todo su apoyo y este trabajo en equipo que es tan agradable de hacer. Bueno, a ver, ahí está, ya Lisa, cuando quieras.
Bueno, muchas gracias Luciana, muchas gracias Mara por la iniciativa y gracias a todas las personas e instituciones que contribuyen a este hermoso proyecto de las Musas de Vanguardia. Quiero saludar a todo el público presente desde aquí, soy de la Embajada de Austria en Buenos Aires. Les deseo una agradable tarde con nuestra musa de la vanguardia austríaca, Margarete Schuette-Lihotzky. Me ha llegado la noticia de que también esté presente una descendiente de Margarete Schuette-Lihotzky, así que sea también bienvenida desde la Embajada de Austria. Buenas tardes, sobre todo a la doctora Bernadette Reinhold. Es un placer contar con usted y con su conocimiento sobre la primera arquitecta austríaca de la historia. Y tengo que decir que este proyecto para nosotros aquí en la Embajada es un proyecto muy especial, no solamente porque enseña jugando a niños y a familias sobre personajes mujeres importantes, sino también porque nos muestra las oportunidades que la pandemia puede traernos. No solamente porque estamos ahora reunidos de diferentes continentes, países, sino también porque me mostró que la pandemia nos da oportunidades de cooperación y permite establecer contactos a pesar de la distancia. Por ejemplo, quiero contar la historia cómo conocí a la doctora Reinhold. Yo hace unos meses tenía una duda sobre Oskar Kokoschka. Y yo mandé un correo al centro Oskar Kokoschka y me respondió de un modo muy profesional y muy amablemente la doctora Reinhold. Me resolvió todas mis dudas que tenía y al final me dijo si algún día necesitabas cualquier cosa sobre Kokoschka o Margarete Schuette-Lihotzky, que la podría contactar. Pocas semanas después me escribió Luciana, con quien el año pasado hicimos el último proyecto presencial en febrero de 2020 en el Museo de Arte Decorativas aquí en Buenos Aires. Así que es destino que estamos reunidos todos aquí en esta reunión. Y para nosotros también es un gran placer, o sea, cuando Luciana se acercó y nos presentó el proyecto, decimos inmediatamente que sí, porque Margarete Schuette-Lihotzky también es parte de un proyecto muy importante de la Embajada, que era una exhibición que presentamos aquí en Buenos Aires hace 3 años, que es la exhibición de Calliope, o Austria, Patria de Grandes Hijas. Esta exhibición muestra la vida y obra de mujeres importantes de la historia de Austria, y Margarete Schuette-Lihotzky es una de ellas. Parte de esta exhibición también es el documental sobre Grete, que actualmente pueden ver de forma gratuita en nuestra página web. Grete integra esta exhibición no solamente por ser la primera arquitecta de Austria, sino también porque contribuyó fuertemente al desarrollo de la arquitectura en Austria y todo el mundo. Sin embargo, bueno, yo no soy ninguna experta ni en arquitectura ni en Margarete Schuette, así que ahora me quiero despedir y paso la palabra a la verdaderamente experta, doctora Reinhold. Ella es historiadora del arte y de la arquitectura y desde 2008 directora del Centro Oskar Kokoschka y investigadora senior en el Instituto de Colección de Arte y Archivo de la Universidad de Artes Aplicadas en Viena. Ella en 2018 ha coorganizado una conferencia internacional sobre Schuette-Lihotzky en Viena, y en 2019 publicó un libro dedicado a la arquitectura de Schuette y a ella. Así que, como ven, no hay nadie mejor que ella que nos puede contar sobre Margarete Schuette-Lihotzky, y bueno, les doy las gracias a ella por estar aquí, y muchas gracias.
Allora, señoras y señores, buenas tardes desde Viena, estimadas Luciana en Buenos Aires y Mara en Madrid. Saludos cordiales en la Embajada de Austria en Buenos Aires, especialmente a Lisa Butzenlechner y Sofía Schlossmann, Dankeschön, así como a mis colegas de la colección de arte y del archivo de la Universidad de Artes Aplicadas de Viena. Tengo de comprenderle o tranquilizarle de inmediato, no voy a dar mi presentación sobre Margarete Schuette-Lihotzky en español, so I will continue in English. Well, my talk will deal with Margarete Schuette-Lihotzky, and the subtitle will be Arquitectura y Política, Architecture and Politics, because if you are going through her life and her work, you will see that these two issues, main issues, will not be separated. So she is, most of you know that she is very well known worldwide for her Frankfurt kitchen. I would say the mother of the modern kitchen in a way, a very condensed version of the kitchen. And especially in Austria and in Germany, she's also well known or very known as a resistance fighter against National Socialism. But first of all, we all know her about the Frankfurt kitchen. So this is Schuette-Lihotzky in 1980 in her apartment in Vienna. And I had to put a quote, and I want to read it in English. I have done a lot of more in my life than just that. If I had known that everyone was always talking about it, I would never have built this damned kitchen. So as you see, she became 103 years old, or nearly. She died 3 days before her 130th birthday. And I will give you a short overview of, about that, what will happen to you in the next minutes. So my talk is more or less chronological. And in between, there are some main issues or some meta issues which are important in her work and in her life. So it begins, of course, with her time in Vienna. It was the Imperial Vienna in this time, and her study at my university, the former Kunstgewerbeschule, then the Red Vienna in the 20s, and the New Frankfurt in the late 20s. Then she went to the Soviet Union, so she was really a migrant or a cosmopolitan, cosmopolics, as this project of Musas de Vanguardia is so well known. And then in between London and there were London and Paris, then she went to Turkey, and from Turkey, where she were more or less safe and working there, she went into the resistance against the Nazi regime back to Austria and was arrested, and she nearly was sentenced to death. So this is a very important part of her life. And you can see from this on that politics plays an important part in her life. Then she called it by herself her second life after World War II or after the Nazi regime. And there were many silent years, and then she was discovered. And I call it 100 awake years. This is a quotation from my colleague Karin Zogmeier. 100 wache Jahre, that means, so she lived 103 years. So she was completely awake her whole life and responsible in all what she did. So first of all, I want to give you an overview about the situation. So I put the most important books about her. The very large one, maybe you see my cursor, this book, Schuette-Lihotzky, this was an exhibition catalog at the Museum for Applied Art in Vienna. In the 1993, there was this exhibition with some kind of catalogue raisonné, and it was shortly translated in Italian, but in a way it's sold out. So, but this is a very important overview into her work and into her life. Then I put 3 books she wrote by her own. I think Erinnerungen aus dem Widerstand, its memories out of her resistance, was the first book. It was published in the 80s. And as I told you, she was discovered in the 70s, more or less in the 70s, because of the second women movement. And so they discovered their own women's history. Then because of the rediscovering of the Red Vienna and the New Frankfurt, and especially in Austria, young historians were interested in the hidden history of resistance fighters in Austria. So as you know, our history in Austria is similar, but not the same like in Germany. And so it was the grand narrative that Austria was occupied and suppressed by the Nazi regime. That's right, of course, but on the other hand, Austria, especially the state, many people have not been only victims. So there was some kind of paradigm changing, and so Schuette-Lihotzky, she gets old enough to be a voice out of this time. A very vivid voice. And for me, it's very important to point out the Margarete Schuette-Lihotzky Raum. It's a club in a way, and they do a very good work and exhibitions. I will talk about it a little bit later. And yes, and there are also some experts. So there is some way worldwide network on Schuette-Lihotzky researchers, and we all are working together. Some kind of family. So now the advertisement minutes are nearly finished. I want to talk about the estate of Schuette-Lihotzky. It's held by my university in our archive, and yes, I put the contact if you're interested, and you can find it very easily. So this estate is one of the most interested estates we have. We have a huge art collection. We are a different institution to the Museum of Applied Art. It's the University of Applied Art. We have our own collection and archive. And it's many, many boxes, thousands of letters and photos, maps, cards, everything, books. So it's really huge, and it's very, very important. And we are very, very grateful that Schuette-Lihotzky made this donation during her lifetime, and she wanted that her estate goes to her the Kunstgewerbe, former Kunstgewerbeschule, nowadays the University of Applied Arts. So, and Lisa mentioned it, very nice. We did a conference in 2018, a 2-day conference, very internationally, and we made a conference paper with more than 25 articles, and we are going to translate it in English. So I hope you can, yes, it will be available soon in English. So then let's start. Of course, I start with her childhood in Vienna. She was born in the before last century in 1897. So during the monarchy, the Habsburg monarchy, and I picked up some family photos. So you can see her in the garden. So she grew up in the house of her grandfather. You can in the 5th district in Vienna. You can see her as a small, very small girl with her father and her family. And so the family background was very bourgeois. Her father was a state official in the monarchy, and I think it was her grand uncle. He was Wilhelm Bode, a very important and famous museums director in Berlin. So, and as you can see, typical for bourgeois family and liberal family, you can see her at a children's ball with a sister on the left side, and with her older sister Adele, called Dele, which was very important in her family, in her whole life, especially when she get arrested. So we know a lot of things about her. So she wrote a lot, but we know many things and details about the letters she wrote to her sister. And the family, the parents were aware that these two girls get a very good education. So Dele became a teacher, and Grete, she had artistic talent, but she had a weak health. So the main problem were the lungs. And I have to mention this because it's always an issue in her life. Her parents died when she was very young on tuberculosis, and Margarete by herself had tuberculosis, I think, from minimum 3 or 4 times. So this was also always an issue, and also for her architecture in the sense of Eugene and other things. Well, she had an artistic talent, and she got private lessons from a painter in Vienna. But very early as a teenager, she wanted to go to the Kunstgewerbeschule, the Imperial School of Applied Arts, which was around 1900. It was founded in the 1860s. And around 1900, it was some kind of hotspot of the modernism. You know, Gustav Klimt studied there, and Josef Hoffmann, Colomar Moser, and so on. And so, but first, she was a teenager, and she went to the Grafische Lehr- und Versuchsanstalt. That's another was a very modern school, or is it until now? And it was founded in the 1870s, and they were specialized on different modern print techniques and also photography. And girls were allowed under certain permissions. And also at the Kunstgewerbeschule, it was allowed from the very beginning on, from 1867, that also girls or young women or women could study there. So, but of course, women were other students than the male colleagues, but this is a story we can concentrate on. So when she, after nearly 3 years, she quit off the Grafische, and then she applied for the Kunstgewerbeschule, and she came into a preparation class, and she was very impressed by the atmosphere there. And very early she got into touch with architecture. And as you can imagine, this was not very common. So in a way, it is not right that she was the first architect in Austria, but in a way, she was on the one hand, she's I think the most famous, but on the other hand, she was this female architect who really developed a continuously career as an architect. So there were 3 classes of architecture in this time at the Kunstgewerbeschule. One was of Oskar Strinnert, I will talk about later. This was the professor, or very important mentor of Grete. Then there was the famous Josef Hoffmann. I think if you got into touch with the Viennese modernism, Josef Hoffmann is very important. And there was the German professor Heinrich Tessenow. He was here for just a couple of years, and he was very important for Grete and for others for building construction, and also for emphasizing the craftsmanship and some kind of pragmatism in designing. So, but I put a quotation, you read it already what Josef Hoffmann said about female students. So they get married anyway, and then they stop being architects. It's not worth to trouble. So there was, of course, Schuette-Lihotzky, or Grete Lihotzky in this time. She wanted to become an architect student, and including her family, her father, and also Oskar Strinnert, her professor, said, well, if you want to become an architect, well, but I'm not sure if there's anybody in the whole world who wants to be have a house built by a woman. So, you know, we are still in the beginning, or in the time beginning the World War I. So you can imagine that the situation for a young lady, emancipated and self-conscious, of course, was not that easy. But Grete reached her goal, or her aim, and these are one of my favorite photos. So you can see her with cut short hair in between her colleagues, and you see it's quite mixed up, ladies and gentlemen. So and I went through the class catalog, so it's in all classes, also in Hoffmann's class. It's nearly half women and men, but you have look on the details in the Hoffmann class. The women did only interior stuff in designing textiles, and of course this is a wonderful work, but they were not really regarded as being worthful in doing urbanism projects or housing researches or projects and so on. So you can see her very self-confident, and I like this very much with her classmates, sitting on a map of Italy, and very. I think it was a good time because women did a lot of work in World War I and also in World War II, of course, and worked very hard and get into jobs, classical male jobs. So I think and in Austria, women got the right to vote in this time, so Grete was right in the right time there. So I talked about Oskar Strinnert. He is not very well known, but he's a very, very important architect from Austria. So, and he taught Grete very, very important things. So there is I put a quotation of Grete. Every millimeter makes sense. Cada millimetro tiene sentido. So this was the one thing that, and the others, that to get a sense for material, to get a sense for function, to get a sense for form. And as you can see, this is a very early work, toilet table during her study. Of course, it has some touch of secessionism or early modernism or Art Deco. But as you can see, and this is very typical for her, it's multifunctional. So she was thinking, always in her work, she was always thinking about doing the best solutions. with a minimum on material and doing it with the best material, inventing material, she was always informed. Also when she was very, very old, she was always interested in new materials in building. So Strinat was her professor and her mentor, and Strinat was also a stage designer and a designer for film sets. So Grete worked for several times in his studio, and he forced her to supply for different projects, and he encouraged her. So, and one of these projects, for example, has to do with housing. So as you can imagine, I think everywhere, but especially in Vienna, the housing situation was very, very poor, also before World War I. So, and in her memories, I forgot it when I showed you the books. There were two posthum publications. One was Warum ich Architektin wurde, why I became an architect. It's some kind of memory of until the time in the 1930s. She puts the quotation of Heinrich Zille. He was a German caricaturist. You can kill a person with an apartment as well as with an axe. So I think it points it out that the situation, you can see it, that people rented their beds, and during the daytime other people, foreign people or other people not out of the family, rented it for hours to sleep there. And then I put you here a photo of the settlements movement. So after World War I, the situation was that evil. So there were no bombardments at Vienna, but people occupied parks and forests and built huts and tried to make it by their own to overcome the bad housing situation. So, and there was one competition about housing for workers, and Strinat said, okay, well, if you want to take part in this competition, young lady of a very bourgeois family, please go to the districts where the workers live and get into touch with their life and with the circumstances. And I think this was some kind of turning point in her life, that being an architect means to get into a social responsibility for people you are working for. So to better their circumstances and with all your senses. So in the sense of art and beauty, as well as in which materials do I take, costs, of course, and different very important issues. And I think her work is in a way recent and until now, if we think about housing on a minimum standard and all that stuff. So la señorita Lihotzky es muy talentosa. Miss Lihotzky is very talented, master her subject both technically and artistically. So this was the final report when she finished her study at the Kunstgewerbeschule. Here you see her license. And on the left hand, I will show you a photo that the political situation, of course, at the end of the World War I has changed, because Austria became from a really huge imperial with a more than 500 years old tradition and history, became a very small country and republic. So there were no emperor anymore. And I put it there because in her memories, Warum ich Architektin wurde, why I became an architect, she described it when she were with her father, state official, but in a way pre-democrat. They joined, you can see the masses who went to the parliament to join the changes, the political changes. And then on the right hand, you see her looking out of a train window. So together with her hermana, with her sister Dele, she went to the Netherlands. Finally, after the war, because it was similar with the Second World War. Many Austrian children starved with hunger, and so they were sent to Switzerland or to the Netherlands to develop for a couple of months and to stay there. So she and her sister went there, and during the early morning hours, she taught children to write and to learn to read and to calculate. And in the afternoon, she were in Amsterdam. She joined in a way. She was she had a small kind of practice at an architectural studio, and she get into touch with the very modern and very progressive housing concepts in the Netherlands, and of course of Berlage and other architects. So she was very impressed by the situation, and it made a big impact on her. So, but beginning with after World War I in Vienna, we had a socialist or social democratic government, and the well-known and famous Red Vienna was established. And as a young architect, she had a lot of experience or ideas to join this, in a way, progressive political changes. And as I told you before, there were a settler movement in. Oh, I see that the picture is overlapping the title. So, but you can imagine. So, and she was some kind of a very young expert in multifunctionalism and in putting many functions into a very small space. So she designed a settler hut. You have to imagine is 4 to 4 meters, so it has only 16 square meters, where she put this very early, not Frankfurt kitchen, but this early kitchen, where you can reach everything with just one take. And so, and she always, when she was very old, she said, no, I always wanted just to build, but she was, and not to write, when she was invited to write her memories. But that's not true. From the very beginning on, from 1921, so I put it here, her first article, she, her work was in company with a lot of articles. I think we have hundreds of her during her whole lifetime. So, and she was she gave lectures. She went to the different settlement associations and gave lectures. And so she was very self-confident. So you can see, you have here now a photo as a young lady, and yeah, I think she was quite knowing what she did. So, and she worked for the Österreichische Verband für Siedlungs- und Kleingartenwesen. So you have to imagine the Red Vienna is very well known for his mass buildings, so with a lot of apartments in one house. So these huge buildings, very impressive. If you ever have been to Vienna, you will know it. For example, the Karl-Marx-Hof. But in the very beginnings, we have the settlement movement. So, and in this early stages of the Red Vienna, she also worked with Adolf Loos. So I don't put a focus on this because it would last too long. So to stress out her work, and one of her early projects, and she made she applied a patent for it, is the Spülküche. I tried to translate it in Spanish, but it's not easy. So it's a multifunctional tool where you can cook and wash your dishes, so you can see. And it's made out of concrete, so a very modern, recent material. It's you can see. You can use it for different things, and on a very small space. And it was exhibited at the so-called Vierte Wiener Kleingartenausstellung, an exhibition about element gardens. So, you know, the to having your own vegetable in your garden and all that things were very important for the years after the war, I think everywhere, but especially, of course, in Vienna. So there was another type she invented or she developed. It's the Kernhaus, Casa Nucleo. In a way, you have on a very small space, square feet, you have this core house. And if you have the money or you're getting more children, you can add it with different rooms. So with stables or for hens and other animals, small animals. So, and there was a one-to-one model at another exhibition, the Vienna Element, Settlement and Housing exhibition, which was on the Rathausplatz in Vienna, a very famous exhibition for her, and she was very well known for this project. And of course, she thought about how to make the interior, and also in this way, the functionality was an issue. So I put there a photograph and some of her wonderful drawings. So you see the Kernhaus type 4, and there's the drawing is from type 7, but you can imagine. So I want to pay the attention to this part. Can you see my cursor? Yeah, that's the so-called Kochkiste. It derives from the military stuff, but it's some kind of box where you can put your pots in if things are not done quite well, or to keep it warm, you can put it there. So this is some kind of modern part. So also of an effective and labor saving tool in a way. So, and of course, so many things can used as different things. And there you can see, if you look in the room beside, there you can see the Spülküche, which I've shown you before. Well, but she also did other things, and was commissioned by other people, and so. But I think the idea is always the same. Das vorgebaute, raumangepasste Möbel. It has to do with some prefabricated furniture, but prefabricated, of course, if you look at that, is not really the right term. It's a very delicate interior for a lady, a bedroom. But you can see that she was quite thinking about how to use space and to optimize it with its different functions. Well, and then during her articles, she came into contact with Ernst May. Ernst May was a German architect, and I would say one of the leading heads of the New Frankfurt in the 1920s. And May, he made they started a little bit different, very different to the Red Vienna, but some things are similar because it was not really right after World War I, but in the 20s. So there was a huge concept of modernizing and urbanizing Frankfurt, and with huge settlements in the periphery, and to develop prefabricated elements in construction and so on. So May, what did he do? He traveled through Europe and was looking for good examples and also for people. So he invited a lot of foreign architects and engineers to come to Frankfurt. And for one time he went to Vienna and wanted to get into contact with Loos. And Loos said, okay, well, there is this Miss Lihotzky, she will guide you through Vienna. And then he came into the studio. It was the old office of her father. And so Lihotzky got into contact with May. And at a certain point, May asked her if she would come to Frankfurt and to be part of this modernization project. Well, and she became a member of the typization department. So you can see this is a photograph with her with colleagues in Frankfurt. I think there were very less women in this department. And in the middle, I put the photo of Ernst May, a very energetic and person. And so they tried to standardize and to lower the costs on the one hand, and on the other hand to develop some modular or types of different things you always reuse and reuse. So there you can see a photo of Grete Schuette-Lihotzky, and this time she was married, at the exposition, at the Werkbund exposition in Stuttgart. And she's known for the kitchen, but she also developed prefabricated parts, so Plattenbau, we call it in German. Maybe you also know it in
panels. Panels.
No, panels. Yeah. And they did it in really, really huge sizes. So the New Frankfurt made a lot of propaganda films, and one of them you can see how they fabricated it to do all the building projects in a relatively short time. Well, and this is some private chapters. So she met there. She also met the German architect Wilhelm Schütte, and they get married in 1927. And Wilhelm, he was an expert on school buildings, so he did a lot of buildings in Frankfurt and elsewhere. So when they were together, and they married in 27, and they stayed together. Also, when she was arrested, he was a very important support for her. He was in Turkey, as I told you before, and but they get divorced after the war. So, as many couples which have been divided, but they worked together until the end. So. We will see that later. So you can see them in Cologne on the one photo, and I put a photo from the terrace in Frankfurt where they lived from their apartment. I think it's quite nice. They had a small garden on the terrace, and yeah, she really, I think she was very self-confident, and she worked very hard and a lot, and she always wanted children, but there was no chance to get one. And I think I have to stress it out that she never was a cook. So it's very funny if you consider that she was the inventor of the famous Frankfurt kitchen, that she didn't really cook in her life. Well, then we go further to the Frankfurt kitchen, the famous Frankfurt kitchen. Why is it so famous? So this is one of the iconic insights, and I think you all know that. It's 6.5 square meters, and everything is organized with multifunctionally, and with at this time with a high level of high level on materials. With an impact of effective working processes, which she studied and researched in the factories of Ford, and she was very interested in all this stuff. And Okay, and on the left hand, you see a 1 to 50 model from our collection made by Franz Nitzto. So we always know these black-white photos, but the kitchen existed in blue, in green, in yellow, and also in other sizes, because in the former times, some households had also servants. So also with 1 or 2 servants, you need more space in a way. But mainly we refer on this very small nuclear kitchen. So the kitchen was, I think it was an issue in this time to think about the kitchen. And it became that famous because it was built more than 10,000 times in Frankfurt. And it became famous because it's also, I would say, an icon of design history until now. It's a beautiful kitchen in a way. And kitchen were, in former days, kitchens were, we know only from farmers' houses where they were the living space and the kitchen together, or the kitchen was a second or third rate room in an apartment. So it was not in the center of an interest. Now the kitchen came as an object of design, as an object from engineering, and so on. So I think this was very new, and this is why the Frankfurt kitchen and Schuette-Lihotzky is so famous for. So I told you that she did a lot of on research. So there are also Bruno Taut, the German architect, for example, wrote a book about kitchens, and Grete Lihotzky, Schuette-Lihotzky was friend with Taut, and here put the cover of Jana Meyer's Der neue Haushalt. From the late 20s, and you can see on the cover what kind of problems you have if you're a housewife and a mother and a working woman. So all this stuff comes together. You have the child looking in the kitchen, and mother is ironing. So it also goes about, of course, emancipation, and to make the life and the work of women easier. Women who started to work, women worked all the time, of course, but with the industrialization, it became more and more a topic. So, and she did some photo documentation. As you can see, I just put 2 photos, how a traditional or old-fashioned kitchen was organized in a way. She made charts of the size. If you have this size, where the table or the highness of the cupboards has to be, and of course, she did diagrams, path diagrams. So it is told that the wife of Ernst May was invited by her to put a path counter and to check out how many meters you have to go. So and many other things. So, and there was also, through modernism, trains, ships, huge ships, and so on, airplanes, and the constructions, and how to put a lot of functions into a small space were very interesting. So the dining car kitchens in trains were very important inspiration for her kitchen. And here you can see again the diagram of the roots of the small kitchen. And you can also see that there is a door to the dining room, that also your path is to bring or to get the food is not that much as it was. So there you have some documentation photos where you can see, I mentioned it before, the Kochkiste, you see, to keep things warm. It's made out of asbest, I don't know the English word. Nowadays, of course, it's in a way forbidden, but it kept the stuff warm. And it was meant that that in the morning time you put, for example, some kind of boiling rice inside, and in the evening time when you come back or for midday it's finished. Then here the tray is out of aluminium to keep it hygienic and very easy to care. Then here you have some kind of process. How are you washing your dishes? And she did, as she did in the Red Vienna, she did a lot of propaganda in a way, lectures. And the idea, furnitures were very expensive. There was a special department in Frankfurt, as it was also in the Red Vienna, but especially in Frankfurt, for standardized furnitures. And the idea was that the whole kitchen was fixed, built in the room, so that you don't had to buy anything. The kitchen was ready. So it was part of the payment of your rent for this kitchen. So the apartments were not that cheap. It was more for the middle classes, but they were very, yes, in a way, very successful. So, and there are two things that the reception of the Frankfurt kitchen could be a lecture by its own. But if you have time, I would have, you can Google you go on YouTube and see the song of Rotifer. He is Austrian, living in London for many, many years. And he did a song about the Frankfurt kitchen. So also his grandmother was a very famous communist resistance fighter, and it's very, very nice. Also his drawings. And now I want to show you just a few minutes from a propaganda film from the New Frankfurt. I told you before, also the new medium of films were used to make it more more common. So I don't want to watch the whole movie with you because some parts a little bit. So you can see it. It tells the story how many time and how much engine it takes to cook in former times, to prepare the wood, to warm the oven, and it's a dirty work in a way, cooking and warming and storing. So you see. Then it says that the herbs and flavor and all the different things are stored in porcelain, which can. So there's the Kochkiste mentioned. She's far away from everything, and you cannot clean it. So it's unsauber. It's not. Hygienic. You see, it's hard work to do. Hot and very, very hard work. So the old kitchen, that means a lot of energy and time wasting for the housewife. The new Frankfurt kitchen in the new settlements with a fixed build furnitures indeed is saving time and saving energy for the housewife. The pots are not anymore in shelves, but they are in a special. So you see the new housewife with cut hair, you see. This is this, how to say, turning stool. So you can move wherever you want, and you can take seat when you're working. You don't have to stand all the time. So if you are doing the vegetables, and if you have waste, you can just put it. There is a special place in the table in the cupboard where you can remove the garbage. You see? And the food or the nutrition, if it's half cooked, you see, you can put it in the Kochkiste, easily to clean. And then you have the trays out of aluminium. Of course, they are easy from their weight and it's hygienic. You see, this is the board. You don't have the papers and they are rotten. There is a special space for the garbage. You see, it's a special way. And yes, this is what I talked about, the process, how to wash the dishes. So if you're right-handed, so you clean the dishes with your left hand. You have it in your left hand, you're doing the cleaning with the right hand, and then you put it in the special trays. And then the ironing is just with one simple movement. You can remove it from the wall, you see. So everything seems easily done. And yeah, you can remove also the lamp on the ceiling. You can put it where you want it. And there you can see the path routes. So in the old-fashioned kitchen, you have about 90 meters to go. So there's the coal and the cleaning table where you make the wood, the washing the dishes, the working table, where are your dishes, where the nutritions are, the Kochkiste, and in the room on the left side there is the table and the dining room. So there are a lot of meters to make your way. And you have to consider that this film was shown and it was very, very popular. So also not so many people could afford to live in a new apartment with the Frankfurt kitchen. It was built about 10,000 times. So, and these films were part of the, okay. Housework has to be done like work in industry and in offices with great efforts and with less energy. So it's only 8 meters in the new kitchen. So there's the oven, the dishes, the table where to work, the turning stool, garbage, cleaning stuff. You've seen it, and the garbage. Okay. The Kochkiste. So I think I will stop here. You can see this film on YouTube. You see there's the way everything is easily done. You can have a look. You find this film on YouTube. So I want to make a leap. She did not only invent the Frankfurt kitchen, but she was also working as an architect for schools. And there you can see the teaching kitchens of the Pedagogical Institute. So you see light and modern materials are important, and to adapt the furnitures on the size of the children or of the teenager. You see, everything is well organized in these rooms. And then the housing was still a topic, so she did many housing projects and modules, but one that is also in the project of Musas de Vanguardia is the Zwofa, that derives from the Zwo Familien, from the very old German term for zwei, for two families. So it's a house with 2 families with very small space, and you have a day and a night situation with beds. And this is a very important main issue in her whole life work, are kindergartens. So one of her first kindergartens were in Frankfurt. So, but we have to consider that in 1929 there were the World Economic Crisis, the Black Friday, and these kindergartens were not built. But there was the first one was in Ginheim. I don't have a picture now here. It was made out of the ideas of Maria Montessori, which was became very, very famous in these times, I think all over the world. And the idea was to, from Montessori, was to prepare the room and the space for children. So I think it's very similar to idea to her main interest in her other works. So, and you see a photo of a model of the kindergarten in Praguenheim. It's a part of Frankfurt. You see this kind of cross, and we will see it again when I talk more about the kindergartens. So in 1929, she lost her job because she was married, and this was the economic crisis, and she did some private projects. But in 1930, she was invited by Ernst May to come with 17 other architects. She was the one female architect to go to the Soviet Union. So Ernst May was invited as many other architects to come. It was called the Brigade May, to the Soviet Union. You know, the Soviet Union was developing from an agraricultural country to an industrialized nation in this time. So the project was quite interesting for them. And maybe we have to consider that Schuette-Lihotzky, she became a social democrat in Red Vienna, but she quit off the party in 27. That has to do with the special Austrian history, because the political climate, as you know, has become toxic, not only in Germany, but also in Austria. So the right-wing or fascistic system and the socialists. And so she quit off the party in 27. And she hasn't been a communist until 39. So, but of course she was infected or very impressed by the idea of the great project of the Soviet Union, especially to build new planned cities where the industry should come up. And she was in different departments, but more or less she was in departments and she was the head of the department of the for buildings for children. And Wilhelm, her husband, was one of the team members of the department for school buildings. So I put a quotation out of a letter to her sister Hermana Dele. It was from 36, so it's quite late, and it makes sure that or clear that she was really building a very, very, very huge amount of kindergartens, kinderclubs, and schools in this time. So it says, I'm currently making children's furnitures for nurseries, so she was designing furnitures, also construction management of my nurseries. My project is now built 9 times, unfortunately, only 2 of them in Moscow. So you see, she's really a busy woman. She had many dozens of assistants in her department. And here you see it's quite late. It's also in the project of Musas de Vanguardia, furnitures or designs for children's, for very small children's. And I very like, if you see it, there are the babies up there. So she had changed the paper. So this is one of my favorite drawings. Well, to explain it a little bit closer, and Thomas Flierl, he lives in Berlin and is an expert on these architects in the Soviet Union, and especially on Schuette-Lihotzky's part there and Wilhelm Schütte's and so on. I put you the general plan of Magnitogorsk. It's one of these planned cities in the Soviet Union, and these cities were divided into quarters, and so in every quarter you have to build the different functions you need. And for example, you see here a children's club in the second quarter of Magnitogorsk. So a children's club, you know, the project of the Soviet Union was that, of course, women are part of the working class, and so you have to organize where children are during the day, and of course, the ideals of socialism means that there, on the one hand, is the family, and on the other hand, there's the socialist society. So you have to invent new forms of coming together and to create community. And these children clubs were one of these. So, and there is also, I put another project from Makeva at the Donbass, you know, nearby the Ukraine. A project together with her husband. This was a school for 600 pupils. We have to consider that the climate situation in Siberia or somewhere else in the Soviet Union or in Russia nowadays is very different. So they were very aware of using material which fits to the landscape, to the region, and material. And also to construct, do you have a lot of snow, or is it very hot in summer, where it is in Siberia, it's very hot in summer and very, very cold in winter. So, and also always thinking the principles of Montessori and others progressive pedagogics. So she was working together with pediatricians. And she also designed, you know it from the project, she also designed furnitures in a special institute at the Academy of Architecture in Moscow. So this is one, it was on your poster. It is a changing table for babies for an apartment without a bathroom. So you see the multifunctionality, it developed and more. Then you also have this writing table, or this desk, which can be created into a working table with a cupboard for the tools, and so. And I think it's self-declaring. Well, then they stayed, both the Schuettes stayed until 1937 at the Soviet Union, and you know from history that the Stalinistic terror became more and more dangerous, especially for foreigners, and so many, very, very many people were killed in the late 30s or at mid of the 30s. So Schuette-Lihotzky, in a way, was very close to the ideas of the Communist Party. But when they had to renew the passports, they left the Soviet Union, and it became very dangerous, because, you know, in 1933 there was the Nazi regime was on power in Germany, and both of the Schuettes were both anti-fascists, and for them were clear that they want go into anti-fascistic work or resistance. So they went to London and then to Paris to try to find work and jobs. So in France, Schuette-Lihotzky made some designs for schools, but it didn't really work. So they were invited by Bruno Taut. I mentioned him before, to Kiev. Taut died very early after this, and so Wilhelm Schuette became an state. The head of a state department for school building. And we have to consider the situation from Turkey. It's very different from now on. It was a very huge modernization project similar but same but different to the Soviet Union at the Turkey in this time under Kemal Atatürk. So you know, they changed the types, the writing, and girls and boys should go to school. So there was a huge alphabetization project and some kind of course, secularization. And a lot of foreign architects, engineers, experts from all over Europe were invited to work there. Many of them were from Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. So, and many of them, of course, had the chance to flee the Nazi regime in Germany. So the Schuettes went there, and as you can see, I think they had quite a good time there. And I just point out some examples. You also have it in the project of the Musas. There is one is a epiphanic decoration for the 15th anniversary of the Republic, of the Turkish Republic, at the Galata Bridge. And on the right hand, you see it's a lyceum, a school, a girls' school from Ernst Egli, the Swiss architect. This is the part behind. And she made an additional part in front of this. So there is one of these very amazing gouaches she always did, and you can see the climate is very different. It's made for Ankara, and you can imagine that there was some kind of corridor or some space in between to the core of the building, and you have these terraces and also the gardens and trees. So I think it's very actual with the climate warming to consider also this kind of points. So, and there is a special project, especially I mentioned it, that the alphabetization was very important, and the village school, so Atatürk wanted to build a lot of schools, so people should also in the villages, far from the centers and the big cities. So people, the Schuettes, so they did it together, traveled around in the regions, and realized, okay, which kind of materials are in which region, and they invented some kind of model schools that people could do it by yourself, so a do-it-yourself project in a way. It's not sure, but it's many hundreds of these schools were built. So you see an illustration of her. It remembers me always on the illustrations of Ernst Trier. And you see him on the periphery of the school of the village, because schools and some kind of new type in these areas are constructed. So the cultural and the climate issues were very important for her to integrate in all her projects. So, well, I talked about it, that she was in Paris, and there she got into contact with different also Austrian resistance groups, communistic resistance groups. And in 1939, she became member of the Austrian Communist Party in Turkey. So there was a resistance group, and she was sent. So she wanted to go and to work against the Nazi regime in her home country. So she became a courier for the resistance and movement, and went back in December 1940. And this is a quotation from Pablo Neruda, you know very much better than me, but this is a quotation she very often made, and there's also a movie about her resistance fighting, which has the same title. So she had only 3 weeks of work in the resistance, and then she was arrested with Erwin Puschmann, a very important communist, Austrian communist. And so it came out when she was in prison. So I picked up a picture of the headquarters of the Gestapo. It was destroyed afterwards, so there's a monument now. And she was arrested, and she described in her book Erinnerungen aus dem Widerstand, Memories out of the resistance, how she was imprisoned, how she did her resistance work, and she was imprisoned, and also about the solidarity under the political prisoners. So she went there in January 41, on her birthday. And the day before she wanted to travel back to Turkey, you have to consider that she was in a safe status in Turkey, that she left this to fight for freedom for her home country. And so she was arrested until the end of the war, so nearly 5 years, and she was sentenced to death. But through an intervention of her husband, Wilhelm, in Turkey, so the political status between Germany and Turkey in this time was uncertain, so it was easier. But all of her group, out of her resistance group, were killed. And it turned out at the end there was a spy. He was called Ossi. And a couple of years ago, we thought that Ossi was responsible for 200 people who had to die through his spy activity. But nowadays we know it's between 600 to 800 people who left their life for their communist resistance work. So what I show you here is that, of course, there were very dark hours. But 1 minute darkness does not make us blind. And so there's a drawing out of her prison booklet where you can see that how they communicated in the prison with each other, the other politicus. So a deep sense of community united as politicus. And we call it Stummalsprache in Austria. So maybe you know it's a finger alphabet, A, B, C. So they communicated and they talked with each other also through the toilet. So this were used as a phone. And there were some women who were nearer the officer and gave alarm if something was going on. And she described a 1st May demonstration in 42. So she said nowhere in Germany and Austria one could sing the International, the Internationale. And through the telephone, they communicate. So in the end, she got arrested to Hartkarze and was brought to Germany. So she was in South Germany when the end of the war came. And she had lung problems, I told you before, but she wanted to work from the first minute on for Austria and to start again to give her experience in her work. So here you see, so her husband was interned in Turkey at the end of the war, and they came together in 46 in Bulgaria, so they met again. And for both of them were clear, both of them were communist, and for both of them were clear that they want to go back to Austria. And Grete also worked for some school projects in Bulgaria, but that's another topic. So the problem was in the first years, Austria was occupied by the 4 allies, the Soviet Union, the Americans, the British, and the France. And in contrary to Germany, Austria got as a Staatsvertrag, a liberation contract in 55, but during these days, so end of the 40s, the anti-fascistic consens turned into anti-communist conscience, and during the Cold War, it was nearly not possible for them to work or to get commissions in Austria. So it was some kind of working prohibition in a way. So she called it her second life, and it was a great, great disappointment for her. So you can imagine she was about 50 and had a lot of international experience, and nobody wants her to work. So both of them and others, some of them went to the former Eastern Germany later on, and they worked for the Communist Party in different projects. I don't want to talk about it, it would cost too much time. And of course, they did a lot of monuments against for the memory of anti-fascistic victims or Nazi victims, and so they were quietly politically active. And she also became president of the Bund Demokratischer Frauen, so the Association of the Democratic Women. So she kept on being a very political person. But I want to come back to one of her main issues in her whole work, beside the kitchen, the damned kitchen, and these are the kindergartens. So the Bauen und Bauten für Kinder, so building and buildings for children. And it's a little bit long quotation, but it's from the 60s, but I guess it was recent also in the 30s for her, 20s, 30s, and after World War II. She's talking about buildings for children. They must be truly children's houses. You know, if you are close to the Montessori pedagogy, that's a term in these Montessori issues. They must be truly children's houses, which also find their own form of expression in scale, color, and architecture. Each room must capture as much light, garden, and nature as possible in its fields of vision. Above all, we must beware of rigid representation, monumentality, complexity of forms or constructions. So, and here you can see two photos from the 50s. She only built 2 kindergartens in Vienna. So she was an international expert, but she was commissioned by the Social Democrat government in Vienna for only 2 kindergartens. So she did a lot of travelings and lectures in the Eastern Germany, Cuba, in South America, China, and so on. But in Austria, she was not asked to do, or her expertise was not needed in a way. So you see two photos of the kindergarten at the Kapaumplatz in the 50s, where you can a little bit imagine of what it means to adapt a room for children. So this kindergarten, in a way, brings together many things we have heard before. So at the ground floor, for her, it was important, of course, the functionality and the rationality in a way, but the multifunctionality. You have a central hall that's that's always an impact on her projects, and then you have the different group rooms. There's also one drawing in the project of the Musas, and you can see the connection between indoor and outdoors everywhere. So you have indoor spaces, and every group for its own has its own entrance to the outdoor space. So and there you can see, we see it later on a little bit better on this photo. You have a central room for the children, a community room, but you have little spaces in between where children can do special things. Or if you don't want to join the group at this moment, you can separate by your own. You know, children sometimes like to separate them. And there you can also see that yes, it's a question of scale and size, and so this is very Montessori to have plants and little animals. Well, and the other kindergarten is at the Rinnbergstraße, It's from the early 60s. Here, if you're the ground floor, it's very similar. If you remember the Praguenheim kindergarten, it's a cross with the central hall, and as I mentioned, these special group rooms. And there you have the entrance space. It's a very, the street outside with a lot of traffic. And then you enter a special atmosphere with this pergola connected with, yes, a natural surrounding. So it has to do with her travel to China, Japan and China. She has been invited by Bruno Taut, who lived in Japan in the 30s. So when she was in the Soviet Union, she traveled with her husband to Japan and also to China. And she went to China in the 50s, so in 56. And she was very impressed by the old Beijing city. And as you can see on the right hand, she did some research drawings from these special Chinese pavilion houses. So it's some kind of courthouses and the organization of the rooms. And she was very impressed, also very recent with our actual climate warming, that you have shadowed courts and streets and things in between. You also have it in the Arabic fairs, but also in China. And here you see, this is a comparison made by Helen Chang. She's American Chinese, and she did a talk on our conference. And she brought it together that Schuette-Lihotzky obviously used her knowledge from this travel to China for her kindergarten project at the Rinbergstraße. So, and this was at the very final end of her career. She invented the so-called Baukastensystem, Sistema Modular para Guarderías, a model system for daycare centers. So you have, it's also in the project of the Musas. You have, you can put it as you want. This is just a configuration for 5, but you can only do it for 2 or for 6. And you see, it depends on if it's for children between 3 or 6 years or little babies. And you have this central room. You have this special selected small rooms beside. There is some kind of guarantee if children are ill or for the for different stuff. You have the central hall, which can use multifunctional for parties or for whatever, for sleeping, for playing theater. And every group has its outdoor part. So here you can see it again. Well, and I mentioned it that the Schuette-Lihotzky Raum, the club, does exhibitions, and the forthcoming exhibition is about her buildings, or building for children. So it will be opened in the end of February. If you are, if we can travel and can see the exhibition. So I told you that she was also a writing architect, and I'm nearly at the end of my talk. And she write many things, and this is an article Christine Zwingli from the Schuette-Lihotzky Club took as a motto: planen und bauen, euch Frauen geht es an. So planning and building, you women are concerned about. So she wrote articles, how can I deal with my apartment situation? So it was, of course, in her dealing as a yes, as a political woman and being politically engaged in the women's movement. And she was some kind of a old voice and very important voice for the second women's movement in the 70s, as you know. And here, this is one of my favorite photographs at the end of, nearly end of my talk. I told you about her book, Erinnerungen aus dem Widerstand. So it means memory from the resistance, out from the resistance, and not memory on the resistance. So in the post-fascistic Austria and during the 60s, a lot of former Nazis came into their position. and she became very, very old. And if you know, in the 1990s, there were a very, very right-wing, so-called neo-Nazi movement in Austria became stronger and stronger, and she was always engaged. She was always a vivid voice and conscious. So you see here, this is a photo from the 60s at a demonstration for the rights of women's rights and against the nuclear the nuclear weapons and the Wettrüsten, we call it in German. Well, then at the end, you also have it at the project of the Musas. This is her working and sleeping room. So the multifunctionality, she planned her own apartment, and this was a third life. So she was rediscovered in a way, and she wrote and spoke and gave a lot of interviews. She went into schools, talked about her resistance. So many of her companies were killed, and she was one of them who remembered them. And here, this photo is taken by the very, I like her very much, Margarete Spilottini. She's an Austrian photographer. And she took this photo after her death, some half a year after her death. And you can see in the former part, you have the writing table. When you remember the photo I showed in the entrance of my talk, there you have a scene where you an area where she did her reading and relaxing, and in the back of the room you see her bed and this very nice textile from Uzbekistan. I think is a memory on her time in the Soviet Union and her travels. So, and she was vivid in her sense and in every sense. So, of course, she had a lot of diseases because of her karze and her imprisonment. But she was very vivid and very, very engaged until the last few days before she died in January 2000. So, and I want to thank the Musas in Buenos Aires, in Madrid, and I told it before to Lisa and to Sophia from the embassy, my colleague Nati from our art collection, who helped us to put all the photos. Of course, Lucy Latinen-Stransky, she's the grand niece or something like that, and the family of Schuette-Lihotzky is always very open-minded to projects. And yes, to all my colleagues, I learned from their work on Schuette-Lihotzky. And yes, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bernadette.
Thank you, Bernadette. It's a very big present for us. We are very amazing. Thank you. Yes. I don't know, maybe you are a bit tired, but there are many questions. If you don't mind, we would like to invite to formulate the questions. Maybe Carmen Espejel wanted to make a question. We invite you, and Marina after you, if you don't mind. So if you want to make
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Bernadette. It was a very amazing and interesting conference or talk about these great women. Thank you very much. Well, I don't know so much as you, I'm sure, and I have some questions because I wrote a book of women in architecture where Grete Schuette-Lihotzky with Eileen Gray, Charlotte Perriand, and who is the other one? There's another one.
Lily Reich.
Lily Reich. I focus on the work of them. And but I did it a long time ago. And later on, I wrote an article on the influences of the American domestic engineers in the work of Grete Schuette-Lihotzky, mainly or focus on the kitchen, because at the beginning I thought that that circuits, that drawings of the different circuits, the clean and the dirty circuits in the kitchen was made or invented by Grete. But we know that these ladies, mainly Christine Frederick, with the book The New Housekeeping, was really expanded all in Europe, and it was translated in 7 or 8 European languages, in French, in German, in Dutch, I think also in Italian, and well, in a lot of languages. So there was a big influence. And my question is, I thought it was just Bruno Taut who showed Grete this work. But I don't know, maybe you have another idea. I have an idea that the associations, mainly Erna Meyer and others, the people who work in the female associations, present this work because the Ernst May group asked her to say something. I mean, to provoke a kind of a discussion or yes, a talk around the kitchen. So this is my question, but I have another.
Muchas gracias, Carmen. I saw you at the last discussion about Lina Bobadi, but my Spanish understanding is little, so I had it only 2 years in school. So
well, but better than my German.
No, but you do a very good and important work. So as I told in the lecture, and maybe you know, that she was not a cook, so she didn't like to cook. Of course, she had a kitchen, but she's doing only some eggs or something like that, she told in a way. And so she was asked definitively by Ernst May, okay, you are the woman in our group, to keep it short, you are the woman in our, you make the kitchen because not because you are a cook, but you are a woman, and it makes more propaganda sense to push our new kind of developing this kitchen. So this was the one part. So it wasn't the decision of her. So it was some kind of, okay, well, I'm doing the kitchen. So that's a little bit easy said, but this is the one thing. The other thing is that you're quite right. There were many books and many researches in this time on the kitchen. So it's Taut, and I wanted to show you this Erna Meyer book because it's also known, but I think the cover shows so much what are the problems are in a way, dealing. So we all know that if doing our housework, our work, having children, and so on. So I think all this literature were quite discussed, and of course she was close to Bruno Taut. But I think she wrote very clearly in her memories, but she never said, okay, I invented it all by my own. Also the aluminium trayers, there is a fantastic documentation work, I can write it in the chat, from Jonas Geist and how's the second, please help me, how's his second name, our Berlin friend? He's at the Bauhaus in Dessau, and they made a film documentation in the 70s, and it's re-edited now from the Bauhaus, putting all these films and making interviews. And there is, for example, some companies who had a patent on these aluminium trayers, and so she took everything she could use, and I think her thing was to make a cool design, to say it very, very salop, and to put all the inputs together. I think this was quite the point. Did I answer your question more or less?
Yeah, it's also very important. Okay, excuse me.
Great.
But we have Christine Zwingel. She's here. She's head of the president of the
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Hello.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello, I'm Christine. Yeah, if it's okay, I may add something to this question.
Yes, of course.
You hear me? Yeah. Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Bernadette. But to this question, to the first years of Schuette-Lihotzky, the first years of her work in the 1920s in Vienna, I did really a lot of research work, and I did a lot of work with Margarete Schuette-Lihotzky herself together in the 1980s and 1990s. And I want to add that she knew the book of Irene Witte. She knew the book of Irene Witte and Christine Friedrich. Yeah, in the 1922, I think it was published in German in Vienna. Yes. She could read it in Vienna. And when she did her first works, Bernadette showed this Spülküche, this first little kitchen for the settlers' houses in Vienna, which was shown at a big exhibition in 1922. She already knew this book and mentioned the book, yeah, in her writings. In 1921, when she did her first article, she did a lot of thinking about domestic work and about living and how is it to live for women and for men and for the children, but and what kind of work to do and take place in a living room or in a flat. But and in this article, in her first one, he did not have any book or any other information about that topic. But I think it was in these years that a lot of articles, were published, and she had one year later. She knew that already. Mm-hmm. So yeah. That is so special to your question, Carmen.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There was another question about the relationship with the Bauhaus. Marina, I don't know if you are here.
Yes, I am. Yes, okay. I would like to know about, because these two movements are contemporary. So I would like if, which was the relationship, if it was any. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Bernadette. In a way, I am near of you because my parents were from Austria and my mother has Austrian citizenship. So, well,
okay,
yeah, in a way, okay. Near. Huh? Okay.
Okay, I see.
Vielen Dank. Das war wunderbar und wunderschön, toll.
De nada. Well, I think you all know that the Bauhaus is in the big canon, and it's always a question how we deal with this canon. And of course, also the Red Vienna and the New Frankfurt is. So in a way, through the Bauhaus anniversary, we got to learn a lot. So in the popular literature, so I did a lecture with my students or a seminar about the Bauhaus. In the popular literature, it's talked about Bauhaus and women. So we all know, so everybody is now realizing that women have done and did things, but we know, of course. But the recent Bauhaus research now is on the point that on very, very different points, there were very similar developments. Yeah, so it's in a way it's clear. Yeah, rationalization, how to deal with industrialization. Then you have the discourse about craftsmanship. So you know the Bauhaus is not the Bauhaus. The Bauhaus in the early years was more expressionistic, and of course it was in the rid of the war. It was very craftsmanship orientated, and then it developed for typization and industrialization, developing, and so on. But and also management and advertisement and all these things. But I think this is on very different places and people, as you see, like Lina Bobardi. So she's I think she's younger, but also like Grete Lihotzky and others. They traveled a lot. So also in the 19th century, they were always in move. And I think, as we talked about now, Carmen pointed out this with the literature. people were very much informed about that. So there were exhibitions. I think exhibition is a medium we underestimate all the time. Exhibitions traveling, and the articles, you know, May is coming to Vienna and he is invited to the Soviet Union. You know, there is a lot of exchange in this time. So of course, they contacts, and so for example, Schuette-Lihotzky was in contact with Gropius, so, and with many others, yeah. Yeah, but I think that's it.
Okay. And maybe one last question, is it possible? Only one?
Yeah, of course.
Oh,
There
no,
was
because
one German question.
you have to be a bit tired, I suppose, because it's
No.
too much time. But Klaus asked here, do you think that the Frankfurt kitchen was a success in terms of the social effect that she wanted to have, that Grete wanted to have?
Yes, I read it. I think he wrote it also in German, Klaus.
Yes.
I think this is an interesting question, and Christine also could talk, I think, for hours about it. So she wrote it in her book, in a posthum book. Why she did this small kitchen. So on the one hand, there's the question, okay, is housework visible or is it not visible? So within the feministic discourse in the 80s, 90s, up to now, we know it was very, very discussed if it's some kind of emancipation work to have a condensed space where the woman is moving and housework is invisible again. So, but I think we have to put on our glasses and to look back to these times. So, and this is the one thing. So it, of course, it was discussed to help each other in housework, but in a way it was not discussed. The other way is, as an architect, she wrote about it, which kind of type of kitchen shall she make? Do you want a living space kitchen, an open kitchen, where you can communicate, or do you want a condensed working area? And she argued it very, very clear. She always spoke very clear and wrote very clear why she and the department decided for a nucleus kitchen, you know. And then she said, when she wrote her memories, or then she said, okay, nowadays we have to think in generations. We have to live in, she also created in her very late years apartments with mixing up generations. So Christina knows much more about this. And to have the kitchen as a communication space. So then you need other sizes of a room. So, and was it successful? I think in a way, it was a matter of fact that the kitchen was there, and I think it helped. And if I consider my own kitchen, it's not that practical as so I'm not an architect. So this is the one thing. The other thing is that people started to, over the years and over the many years, the kitchen didn't work anymore. So in the 1990s, it was allowed to remove the kitchen, and many people they hated the kitchen, you know. So this is the reception after this famous Frankfurt kitchen. And you have another size. It's not 60 centimeters as we have now as a standard. It's much smaller. Where do you have the dishwasher? You don't need the Kochkiste. Nobody really, maybe in the beginnings. And many people didn't want to live close the door of this kitchen, for example, because as we know from social studies, people living in an apartment in a way is a very traditional kind of setting of family and all that stuff. So people closed the door and wanted a special bourgeois, more or less bourgeois dining room, and they accepted to walk around the kitchen, you know, and close the door because they have a loss of a space or of a part of a wall. So in a way, was it successful? Yes or not? Yes, it was successful in this way, that it made kitchen to a room you're looking at. Of course, the literature Carmen mentioned it, but this was became some kind of icon. Yeah, but in a way, yes, it has its own history, and now we are nearly 100 years later, and hopefully kitchen developed over the centuries, as we know.
Bueno,
Well,
no sé si alguien quiere añadir algo más, si no yo creo que podemos ir terminando. Si alguien quiere decir algo y Bernadette todavía quiere estar con nosotras, pues si no, thank you very much, Bernadette. It has been the best afternoon in this week for me and for it's a pleasure to hear you, and thank you, because it's a very good season for Musas de Vanguardia, and we wait for you next season about Charlotte Perriand. Pero hasta entonces vamos a continuar difundiendo el trabajo de Grete Schuette-Lihotzky en nuestro proyecto, y bueno, pues yo no quiero más que daros las gracias a todo el mundo, y bueno, pues hasta pronto. No sé, Luciana, Bernadette.
Muchísimas gracias, Bernadette, y todos los invitados que hacen que sea tan especial esta charla y conversación.
Thank you very much to all of you.
okay.
It was really a pleasure.
Muchísimas gracias a ustedes.
Pleasure to me.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Gracias.
Buenas noches.
Gracias. Chao.
Buenas noches,
Chao.
danke,
Muchas
Bernadette.
gracias.
Danke.
Adiós.
Thank you.